Good morning. This is going in the informal playlist and will pretty much be the opposite of the short little videos I've been doing. I wanted to show you my river. I have a thing for water. It's very grounding. I find it very grounding. Massive monster nest up there. Pretty much come and sit down here by the river every day. So I watched Joe Rogan's podcast yesterday with Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin has been on tour with Jordan Peterson. I actually went and saw them in Seattle, which is pretty cool. Got to meet both those guys a little bit. Jordan Peterson is blown up, and it basically started from pointing at this political correctness stuff, this control of language stuff. So maybe even more than PC control, but that's what PC is. Control of language. And man, I don't know. So Jordan Peterson's blowing up. I'm gonna put what's going on right now into words. And that's like the whole thing. I feel a really, really like strong pressure to get my thoughts out there, and I don't know why exactly, but I feel like I have a pretty good sense of the big picture. I feel like and that's always how my brain has worked, and I don't know. It's crazy to me how this whole thing is happening. That I started studying money 7 years ago now. I'm studying this exact same kind of stuff, and then it just keeps getting louder and louder and louder. And now more and more so people who are talking the same thing I'm saying are absolutely blowing up. Jordan Peterson has like 1.2 million YouTube subscribers, and I think it was 100,000 a year ago. And basically nothing 2 years ago, I think. And he's talking about responsibility. A professor gets up on stage and talks about responsibility, and like a rock concert, it turns into a rock concert somehow. That's wild. It's a wild time. And between Dave and Joe on their podcast that came out yesterday, I feel like they nailed some stuff. Joe, I think, has been a leader of this for a long time. He's talked to a whole lot of different people and has a crazy perspective on it. And you know that when he puts out a podcast, he's talking to these people behind the scenes a lot more. I think he has a crazy pulse on what's going on. I think he's a crazy instrumental part of it. And then Jordan, I think, is a huge part of it. Jordan Peterson. And now Dave's been on tour with Jordan. I think Dave already had a pulse on it pretty well himself. Now he's on tour with Jordan, seeing it from a whole different angle. And so I got a VIP ticket, and that meant that we got to spend an extra hour and a half or so, 2 hours, in a much smaller group after the event, with just Jordan sitting down taking questions from the audience. And really kind of getting into some stuff that's not up on YouTube, that Jordan doesn't talk about on YouTube. Okay, so another way of saying the same thing. Joe is talking about exploring ideas that have been hushed up. Jordan is doing the same thing. His message is so simple and was so common sense a while ago, but has been so stuffed down, so suppressed. Donald Trump, same thing. And I think this is why he's president. Literally, I heard about Donald Trump running. My coworker told me. She said, watch this video, his announcement. I watched it. I said, right then. I said, this guy's going to win. Donald Trump will be the president, and more people will turn out than have turned out in a long time. And I didn't exactly know why then. Again, it's still like, I'm trying to put this thing into words, what I feel happening. But it's about PC. He was already in that first announcement he was saying stuff that people hadn't talked about for a while, and he was saying it in such a way of like just saying it and breaking the PC and the bull in the china shop thing. This is a fascinating time, and I think we've been in it for a while, and I think it's more fascinating than most people recognize yet. And man, Dave and Joe rather, sitting down for 3 hours yesterday, just talking, having a conversation. The perspective those two guys have combined into a conversation. Like conversations do. It's like it creates its own thing. These two people sitting down and sharing their thoughts with each other, bouncing stuff back quickly and honestly and straightforward, like telling the truth. I think they nailed some stuff. Okay, so here's an idea I had yesterday that I'm going to do. I'm going to go through that podcast again and make a video myself of responding to them. So probably only like 10% of the time they spend, I'll spend. But I'll make a video where I show like the time that I'm responding to and then what my response is. Because one, they don't talk about cryptos at all, which is fascinating to me because I think it's the exact same thing. I think cryptos are the exact same thing that they're talking about. They're talking about it from a political, Dave more political and Joe more, what's the word? Like just regular people. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. Like society, a societal point of view. But I think so much of what they're saying lines up exactly with what's going on with cryptos, and they don't know cryptos, so they don't catch it. Another thing that I've been thinking, working on for a while, is Scott Adams. Scott Adams, I think, is nailing some stuff. If you haven't watched it, I'll link it below. I made a 10-minute video called The Pinocchio Story. Scott Adams called Kanye a master persuader 5 or 6 years ago. And Kanye tweeted, "I love the way Candace Owens thinks," which like brought the internet to its knees like that. So then Scott Adams made a video saying that Kanye just sparked the golden age. That Kanye just ripped a hole in reality by saying, "I love the way Candace Owens thinks." And it felt like it. Then Kanye saw that video and tweeted it, like pointing at Scott Adams on his own Twitter feed saying, this guy's nailing it. This is what's happening. I think that's what Kanye meant. I think it was in that same video that Kanye tweeting out Scott Adams, that he had another tab open, which was a Jordan Peterson video. So Kanye's watching Jordan Peterson. Kanye made a song 5 years ago called The Pinocchio Story, talking about telling the truth in kind of a radical way. Jordan Peterson harps on the Pinocchio story. He has a Maps of Meaning series, which I think is 12, 15 lectures, and 3 of them are Pinocchio. Like a 2.5 hour lecture about just Pinocchio. 3 times in a row. 7 hours worth of digging into Pinocchio, about telling the truth in kind of a radical way. Which, the way Scott Adams says it, is the same way Donald Trump is telling the truth in kind of a radical way. And yeah, he lies all the time, and a lot of facts are weird. It's so hard to say, to try and put into words. He talks about the past a lot. Okay, well, I don't know where to go. Donald Trump's pastor, growing up, the guy who married Donald Trump the first time, was Norman Vincent Peale. Norman Vincent Peale was a prolific author back in the day. He wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking, and it's like a super well-known book. I read that book for the first time 4 or 5 years ago, and have considered since then it to have had a significant impact on me, on the way I think. Scott Adams credits it for a lot of the way he thinks. Scott Adams has been nailing stuff lately. Absolutely. Like, predictions he was making 2 years ago are becoming more and more obvious, and he knew exactly what he was talking about. And if you looked at it the right way, he was nailing it then. But he's been able to predict now real life stuff. And Donald Trump is in Korea, North Korea. Like, that doesn't make any sense compared to how the world worked a few years ago. Kanye, as Scott Adams says, and as Kanye confirms, tore a hole in reality by talking about Candace Owens. Then Kanye made an album, 7 songs long, and for a while those 7 songs were the top 7 songs. His whole album was just the top of the chart. That's wild. So this is funny too. Back to Joe. Joe and Dave is my main kind of theme here that I'm working off of. Joe and Dave, neither of them even know Kanye, which is hilarious to me because I think Kanye is so part of what's going on. And I think that if Joe and Dave could mix in Kanye and Trump and Scott Adams and that, what's going on there, and cryptos, I think now the big picture is really starting to come together. Like, I think Dave and Joe nailed so much of the big picture. But I think if you include cryptos, holy crap, we have a whole nother layer of the big picture. And then I think if you include Scott Adams and Trump and Kanye and that way of thinking, then I think we have a whole nother layer of the big picture. So I'm going to make a video on this too. It was fascinating to me. Candace brings up Kanye. David Rubin says, well, I don't really know Kanye or his music. And then Joe and Dave are talking about it, and Joe, doesn't even remember Kanye's name. He calls him the other guy. And yet, Joe and Dave, I think, it's like the same underlying force is driving Joe and Dave, as is driving Kanye, as is driving cryptos. And these parts are so, it's like they don't recognize each other as being on the exact same page. Yeah, I think we're going into a fascinating time. And what that same page is, this I do think Dave just nails. It's who wants control and who wants to let go. I think the two camps can be pretty well said that way. Any amount of control. I think that's the dividing line. One says, I'm a person, other people are people. I am just going to do the best I can. I'm going to live in the moment and take the most advantage of what I can now. I have what I have. I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to move forward the best way I can. I'm going to treat people right. I'm not going to try and control other people. I'm going to do the best with what I have that I can, period. And by definition, that means not trying to control other people. Any time, energy spent on controlling other people is necessarily detrimental to doing the best you can with what you have, I think. And I think that's the dividing line. And then we have the opposite of that is PC. Political correctness is, by definition, trying to control what other people are saying. which is the book 1984. A main underlying theme of that whole book is control of language, manipulation of language, the slimming down of language to control how people think. It's another thing Jordan Peterson harps on. So I have a bunch of untied together loose end thoughts here. I'm going to read this book again, The Power of Positive Thinking, and I'm going to pull quotes out of there and put them up on YouTube that I think will help Donald Trump make a lot more sense, that I think will help Kanye make a lot more sense, and that I think will illuminate this moving forward, this not caring what other people think. Donald Trump did something crazy by just standing up and going forward and saying what he thinks and just keep moving forward. And scandal after scandal after scandal came up and stuff that would have destroyed other people, and Trump just kept moving as if it didn't mean anything. Kanye, same thing. In that video I made called The Pinocchio Story, I put up a quote from Kanye. He says, what's the word I'm looking for? Stuff stirred up. Controversy is my gym. I'm just going to say what I think. In other words, I'm just going to say what I think. And if people freak out about it and lose their shit, that's them, man. I can't do anything about that. And I certainly will not try and control that. I'm going to say what I think, irregardless of what other people are going to blow up and lose their minds. And if I'm going to try and adjust what I'm saying to placate them, then I'm not being truthful. A radical kind of truthfulness. I think that's where we're going. I think there's two sides. I think there's this radical truthfulness, this let go and just live, just be, just say what I think, do the best I can with what I have, live in the moment, or political correctness. And so I'm also going to do the same thing with another book that Jordan Peterson harps on, or another thought he harps on. So he studied communism. He studied Nazism, the big screw-ups in human history. He studied them a lot, according to him, and it seems to me like he has. He harps on this book, The Gulag Archipelago, which was written by a dude who was part of the Russian military, got captured by the Germans, was in German war camps for a while, then got somehow back to Russia, but Russia saw him as a threat because he had been in German war camps, so Russia put him in war camps. In the Gulag. And he was in the Gulag for something crazy, a decade or more, I think. And remembered a whole bunch of stuff and then wrote it down. And he's credited for having a large role in bringing down the Soviet Union by releasing this book. And the book I've already started reading is gnarly. But, so I'm going to do the same thing with that book. I'm going to read it and pull out some quotes, some passages that first are horrifying, and second, I think will make PC make sense. And I think will make what I'm saying make sense, where we have these two choices. Either we let go, or we try and control. And try to control leads to Gulag Archipelago. PC leads to Gulag Archipelago. It leads to 1984. And tell the truth, in a Norman Vincent Peale way of the power of positive thinking, he boils the whole thing down to the Bible. Of just tell the truth, live in the moment, and tell the truth. Meaning, say what you think. We can't know the truth. We're only humans. We can't know the truth if we limited ourselves to saying only what we knew to be exactly true. Well, we can't even say a damn word. To tell the truth doesn't mean be perfect. It means be you, be real. Man, a weird time. Just personal now. Just a crazy thing that blows my mind. Um, I made this video called A Pinocchio Story. It's 10 minutes. I think it strings together and in kind of an artistic way shows the big underlying thing of what's happening here. And it comes from the fact that Kanye made a song called The Pinocchio Story, talking about very explicitly, tell the truth, like be you. And Jordan Peterson harping on the same thing for decades. When I was a little kid, I carried around that movie. It was apparently, like I hardly remember this, but apparently my favorite movie that I'd watch 2, 3, 4 times like a day or even back to back to back. And that I carried around with me. So I wasn't watching it. Apparently, I had this thing in its case. Like, if I was playing Legos, I'd carry it with me and sit down and put it next to me and play Legos and pick it up and go wherever I was going. And while I'm eating, like carrying around the movie Pinocchio. And just watching it. Apparently, I've watched that thing like a couple hundred times, maybe more than that. And of course, I didn't know why I was watching it. I was a little kid. I'm talking when I'm 2, 3, 4 years old. I watched it again recently because Jordan Peterson was talking about it so much. And man, it blew my mind how well I remembered it. How much I could see how it shaped me. How watching this movie that many times at such a young age wired my brain in such a way. So then to hear these guys talking about it right now is crazy. To have been saying all the stuff that Joe and Dave said in their podcast yesterday. I've been saying it for a while. And it feels like they're kind of the tip of the spear in terms of public awareness of all this kind of stuff. And this probably sounds crazy, but in the same way, a lot of what Trump said sounded crazy. It sounded crazy that we'd be making peace with North Korea, and now look at us. It sounded crazy that cryptos would come. That the world would be adopting a free money. So again, this is personal. But I was thinking, how do I put into one sentence, how do I have a really definite big goal? Something I can, a definite, easy to understand, easy to state thing that I can look at and move towards that kind of epitomizes all the different little goals so that day to day I can help myself do the right stuff to get to where I really want to go. So the one sentence to epitomize where I really want to go that will help all the other stuff line up and be helpful. And I came up with, I want to be on Joe Rogan's podcast. I want to talk to Joe. I want to have a conversation with Joe. And I feel like, and I'm going to try and in some sense show it, prove it, by going through and chopping up and inserting my thoughts into their podcast. I think I have a lot to add to that conversation that they had yesterday. I think they did a really good job summing up the big picture. But I also think I have a pretty good understanding of this Norman Vincent Peale way of thinking that describes Trump and describes Kanye and describes Scott Adams that Dave and Joe really didn't incorporate in their conversation. And I also think I have a pretty good understanding of the cryptos, which helps their conversation make a whole lot more sense, but they didn't really include it. My phone might die here any second. And that is like the Norman Vincent Peale way of thinking. It's Scott Adams, I've read and talked about his books too. Like, set your sights really big. And just move, do the right stuff every day. And be in the moment. And pick a big goal and be in the moment and just keep being in the moment, heading towards that big goal. That's how to get there. It's a weird, crazy time. That goes both ways. Like, it's crazy good. That Norman Vincent Peale way of being, it feels good. And the more of us are that same way together, our race will move forward so incredibly fast. And I think that is cryptos. Unfortunately, I think it's the same kind of thing. So back to the Ayn Rand video I made, which I'll link below too. The more people switch to this way of thinking, the more purely hateful and purely destructive the people who are still in the PC world become. The more the PC world becomes. It's like there's two worlds. There's a PC world, and this is where pretty much everybody lives. And then there's this other thing. It's just a dot right now, but it's growing. And it's starting to grow really quickly. And that's the truth thing. This is Jordan Peterson. This is Kanye. This is Trump. This is cryptos. I think these things are all the same thing. This is Joe Rogan and Dave. But unfortunately, like over here, there's a whole bunch of people who are adding a lot. And as they stop being part of this, they're adding a lot in their ways, you know? Like, people are still people, and people still have good and bad in them, and there's still plenty of good happening over here. But it's in the way of kind of trying to control and